here we are in the car. This is the J&T Marital Arts podcast, difficult discussion section.
Maybe not for you.
Tara is like, I want to say something. And I'm like, say it. And she's like, she sounds like a transformer. So, difficult discussion. Getting the things in life that you want, preparing for them, working towards them, setting goals, making goals, missing goals, understanding your speech and how it needs to be correlated with what you want. So, would you like to continue this discussion?
Well, we've obviously just had a couple examples, obvious to us, in the car ride, just starting out. They were miscommunicating. I was thinking one thing, you're thinking another. We're going somewhere, you're like, all right, can't wait to get to Lebanon and ride. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, well, I need to get back at a decent time to finish some work. And you're like, well, I thought you weren't going to be working the weekends. And I'm like, well,
just the other day,
like I have to.
You said I need downtime. I don't want to work on the weekend. And it's not every weekend. It's just, when you feel you need it. And so I thought this whole weekend was going to be just a screw-off weekend. Just do what we want, have fun.
Well, I was hoping so too, and I probably ruined half of my weekend just thinking,
well,
I've got to do some stuff.
That is so pertinent, because what very successful people do, the only thing they do is they are in control of their thoughts. They're in control of their mind and how their brain and their thoughts and their distractions affect them, right? And they know when to focus, and they know when to defocus. They know what to say to themselves to motivate themselves. And sometimes it's probably survival. I know people who have lost weight by jogging and running and imagining a tiger is chasing them, and it puts their body into a fight or flight mode, and they burn more calories, they can go longer. But I don't think that's a good long-term strategy, because then when the tiger's not chasing you, you're probably going to put the weight back on, because your body's going to be like, hey, we need to store up some energy for that tiger comes back. You don't want to always be motivating yourself through fear or anger or sadness. You want to motivate yourself through positivity, through a goal, through an understanding that if I do this now, I don't have to do it later. And, motivate your delegation through, I want someone to help me so I don't have to do so much work. But what you're going to do in that case is you're going to give up a little bit of time to train them. You're going to give up some money to pay them. And that has to be the value that you want. You want some time back, so you're willing to spend the money. And for me, you've seen it. A lot of times I make less than than my employees. And I'm the business owner. And most people wouldn't understand that. But I wanted the job to be done more than I wanted the money for me to do it. And so there's a lot of negotiation that goes on. And what you're doing is you're going, well, I got a long day here, and after I'm done bike riding, I can work. And I'm like, well, I thought we were going to go bike ride, then we're going to stop and have dinner, or go home and have dinner, and then we were going to have some wine tonight, And you're like, oh, I got to work. That's not how you sounded.
That's good.
That wasn't my Tara voice. My Tara voice is more like this.
I thought that was your mom's voice.
Oh, no. Her voice is like this.
Okay. Almost a whole octave higher.
Oh, yeah.
So I started off, I think that I had a nice walk this morning. I cleaned up the house this morning, so I had quite a bit of time. I wasn't listening to anything, had some time with my own thoughts, and I hope that I really did sort through some things as I think I did, and I'm not making up something.
Yeah.
But I feel like I don't even know where to
Well, you want
begin.
something you don't think you have. You want something more that you think you have less of right now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And
if you want to name it, you
been,
can. We can talk
it's
about
been
it. If you don't want to name it,
a goal and
that's
desire.
Okay.
Two things ever since we've been together.
Yep. Can everybody guess the two things a woman wants when she meets her dream man?
They probably can. And, starting the business that I'm in currently, which, I started in different ways years, good 10, 15 years ago, but it didn't really take off. I work better with other people and helping them bring things to fruition rather than just bringing my own stuff to fruition.
Well, and that's what you're doing with the herbalists and the other teachers and stuff. You're helping bring their stuff to the world.
Right. And so it's kind of like I'm the chef in a way, helping bring things together, or the menu planner at least.
Yeah.
And but other people are the gardeners and helping to bring things together. I'm not doing I need a lot of ingredients to work with. I'm not the ingredients creator. And so it's been a blessing in many, many ways. And it has also helped to see how I can bring some dreams to fruition. And so I do use that positive motivation. It's not only like when I think about the things I was planning on working on this weekend, it's not just like, oh crap, I'm behind, or like my boss is going to yell at me. I'm my own boss. It's that I want to keep the customers happy, and we have it's not a written down release schedule. I say that this one project that I have, this one site that I have, that there's going to be new content each month. I don't actually say on the site what date.
Right.
I have my own goal date in my mind, and I'm trying to head it off at the pass before I start getting emails like, hey, when's the next release?
Yep.
Plus, I have a whole other work schedule, a bunch of other tasks to do this week, that if I get this one done earlier, that's one less thing on my to-do list. And I currently don't have enough help to be able to delegate a number of tasks, and I'm still training. And so my plate is just extra full, and my mind goes towards where just a week ago I was like, I'm going to be taking evenings and weekends off. My mind goes, well, if I just spend 3 hours this evening doing these two things, well, then that's 3 hours that I won't have to work on it this coming week. But I literally have fretted over it, or just thought about it.
Well, we're coming up on Monarch here, which is a place we mountain bike, so let's decide. Are we going to Monarch, or are we going farther?
Well,
I'm okay with either.
Let's change it up and go to Lebanon, and
we're going to Lebanon! Yay!
Well, Monarch will be our morning.
Egan. We're going to Egan.
Monarch will be our morning spot.
Mornings at Monarch.
Right. So I'm.
They're putting in another trail there.
So I'm caught between, as a woman, okay, I'm going to speak so interestingly the other day, I don't remember if this was in yesterday's recording but we were talking about a young man who had contacted us, and we were helping, or I don't remember if I think me and you were discussing just kind of this and tangential things, and you're like, and in my mind I was like, well, you just got to know when enough is enough, because that's like my motto. That's what I'm trying to figure out,
Yeah.
Like, do I really, like literally, do I really need to work this weekend, or I can answer a couple emails saying, this week the new release will come out if that comes up, or if someone gets upset and wants to unsubscribe because it's not out by the
within
20th.
30 days, yeah.
I mean, it's totally on schedule because it's within the month.
Yeah.
But who knows? You know, because I try to prevent problems.
Yep.
And so my motto lately has been, Tara, when is enough enough? And because I tend to, I put things in order of importance, but what my tendency is to, instead of lay them out in a reasonable time frame, I lay them in order and then I accordion smush them together.
You go until you burn out.
Yeah, and it's just like the next thing is urgent. There's always like,
right.
No, this is important. This isn't.
Right.
Well, the next thing is important.
Well, you go to the point until you get frustrated, and then you're like, I got to get out and do something. And
I was just even going to ask you, like in one of the businesses, you know, I listen to my clients very intently.
Finish what you were going to say about the guy that we talked to and what I said about guys.
So my thought was, well, you got to know when enough is enough, because then you know when to say yes or no, and you're like, well, to a young man, you know, he can go for years,
yeah,
without burning out,
yeah,
and you know, we all as individuals have our own capacity, and I can certainly go and go and go. But as a woman, it's at this.
You said you were shocked when I said that because you didn't realize.
It totally makes sense. When you said it, it was like, well, yeah, of course. And so we both listened to a podcast recently with Andrew Huberman, who is a neuroscientist and has his own podcast. He was on Joe Rogan the other day.
Andrew, we're promoting you. Send us some stuff.
So, what was interesting though is, I think you just listened to the beginning of this one, but it was like perfect timing, because the podcast was about how to basically structure your day with these number of things that he's been teaching since January. He started his podcast at the beginning of January 2021, and I've listened to a good number of the podcasts, and so, but this one particularly intrigued me because it's exactly what I needed. I've been thinking about recently, like, what is a healthy schedule? Because I've never worked in a corporate environment. I've always either worked for myself or it's been.
You've had jobs.
I've had jobs, but they haven't been like a standard schedule.
They weren't office jobs either.
And I purposely avoided office jobs. And so my expectation of what I do in a day is my own expectation.
Right.
And what I've been learning is, I can be extremely productive, but I'm probably not the best boss to myself.
You stack it hard.
And so it was interesting listening to this podcast where he since the beginning, he's talked about what are called ultradian cycles. And these are natural cycles that people have good attention span. Basically, from beginning to end, starting a project to kind of easing out of a project, is 90 minutes is what most people's capacity is. Now, some people have one cycle a day that they can get a good amount of work done. Some people it's 2 or more. But the key is, so this podcast in particular was about when to time these work cycles. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, if a person is I couldn't just do 1 or 2 of these today, and I get in the zone. Like, I can just like start and I can be so focused, my internet's on, and I don't like get distracted into Facebook or messages, or I focus. You've experienced that because you'll be talking to me and I'm not all there.
Yep.
And so my next question though, after listening to that, and then you talking about, a young man in particular starting a business or, a work career, is, okay, well, what's reasonable for a woman? When you have a cycle, a natural, innate cycle that is, there's a ramp-up period, and then there's a winding down period, and then there's a processing period, and there's a literal period. And
then there's the moon phases.
And there's all kinds of information out these days about, a woman's cycle and following the phases. And, I have a friend who does mentoring in that, and that's one of the tools.
We could track your biorhythms too. That'd be really easy to do.
And so what was another really poignant part of our conversation the other day is I said, I feel like I want to perform like the men, like this Huberman, I don't know if they specified, if they've done studies differing between men and women, or specifying between biological men and biological women, right, these days. But it's almost like a taboo to even have the thought of doing a study on how biological men and biological women differ, because they're supposed to be the same.
Yeah, they don't want there to be any differences, but there's major differences, and they're not negative. They're not negative on either side.
Oh, like Yarrow, holy cow.
Yeah.
So I felt myself feeling just in the last day, like resentful of, I think, what is the fallout of feminism. And that is that I think the early feminism, the suffragettes, freedom to vote, to have a bank account and so forth, well done, absolutely,
Yeah.
But I think there's been a fallout of feminism where now
it's gone too far.
Well, some women, yes, are very masculine and can keep up with the guys. But the illustration that I made the other day is like, if you were on, let's say, a soccer field, I don't know, let's make it more overt. Let's call it American football. And you had the girls' team and you had the guys' team playing each other. There are, even if the biggest girls, there's going to be a huge difference, right, in performance. But the thing is, in business and in life, the men and women these days, congratulations, we are on the same playing field. But do we have the same equipment? Do we have the same abilities? Are we really equal? And what happens is, and I've heard, I took a class with a woman who was a high up in a marketing firm, and she said she would literally, at work, be on the bathroom floor crying because her cycles were so bad. And she eventually learned that it was her work demands,
her stress,
that she was putting on herself or allowing to in her life. And so she ended up eventually doing her own thing. And so when I say that I found myself feeling resentful, and I wanted to be real clear in myself, like, where's this coming from? Because, just having emotions that are simmering in you, negative emotions in particular, is not healthy. You need to process it. And what I was thinking is, like, I want to be able to perform like the guys or the top performers. But how far do I go in forsaking my own well-being? And am I really doing that? Am I just perceiving that because it's tough,
Well, so what you're doing is different than what anybody else is doing. And you're a different person, and your capacities are what they are. Your capacities are very, very high in certain areas, and they're mediocre in other areas, and they're low in other areas, right? Just like everybody else. So you can't compare. Okay, let's say you want to have strong arms, so you decide that you want to arm wrestle me, and then every single time we arm wrestle, I beat you, so then you think you have weak arms. That's not how you would gauge the strength of your arms, right?
Yeah.
You would gauge the strength of your arms by saying, here's what I have to carry on a daily basis, and I want to double it, right? So you're carrying 500 pounds over the course of a day, and you want to be able to carry 1,000. So then you would work towards that, right? You wouldn't compare yourself to a guy who's carrying 4,000 pounds a day and go, well, I'm no good because I can't carry 4,000. You compare yourself against yourself, and then you work on yourself, okay? And if you need downtime, you say, okay, last week I took 4 hours of downtime. This week I'm going to take 8 hours or 6 hours, whatever it is, right? You don't tell yourself, I'm going to take the entire weekend off, when 10 weeks before that, you only took time off to eat on the weekends, right? And to sleep, right? And then all of a sudden you take a full weekend off. You're essentially blowing your load, right? You're blowing everything on that one weekend, and then you're like, shit, I didn't get anything done. I can never do that again. And now you're back to the other extreme, right? So you want to gauge it. Like you said, I want to take evenings and weekends. Well, maybe you could take evenings and one day. And now you take that 8 hours or 10 hours you'd work that one day, you cut it in half, and you only work 5 hours each day. And then it feels like you had a lot more time off, right? Because you took 5 hours each day and worked, and then you had the rest of the day off both days. Instead of 10 hours one day and one day off, and you barely caught up on your rest or your activities, and then all of a sudden you're back working again on Monday, and you're like, well, that was worthless. Right? You've seen me.
I have been going through versions of that.
Right. I know, I live with you.
Yeah.
And by the way, you live with me, so you see what I do too. And so you've got to gauge yourself against yourself, right? And it's not always a increase. Sometimes it's a decrease. And sometimes, you've always heard me say, the daily decrease, right? Decrease one thing a day that you're doing that isn't productive, but a lot of things that don't seem productive in the business world are very productive in your personal life, right? So it can't be gauged, again, like you wouldn't gauge yourself against a guy. It can't be gauged against your business life, against your personal life, right? Because otherwise you're doing the same thing. You're comparing apples to oranges, and there's no comparison. You can't find a happy medium. You can't find balance comparing apples to oranges, And we could go and describe all the different things about apples and oranges, but obviously they're very different, right?
Yeah.
So you have to decide, just like we said to this guy that called us, you have to decide what you want, what you're willing to do to get what you want, what you're willing to settle for, what you're going to be happy with, how long you're willing to wait to achieve your goals, right? You're not going to achieve a goal of making $1 million in a week in 1 week. You're not going to go from 0 to $1 million in 1 week when you don't have a business, right? You got to start your business. You got to build your business. And that was the conversation with him. How do I do these business meetings and still maintain a relationship with my fiance? Because she's starting to complain, right? And she has to know what you're doing and why you're doing it. Well, you got to know that for yourself, which is how you started this out. You said, I have goals, I have things that I want to do and things that I want to have and get. You're contributing, right? You're not doing the whole thing yourself. We work together. So you're contributing, I'm contributing. We're getting to the point where we can do the things we want, we can get the things we want, we can live how we want. And that's a constant thing, right? That doesn't end. I mean, you go talk to somebody that's 60 years old and say, what are you working towards? What do you want? What do you have that you worked towards for the last 15, 20 years? And they're like, oh, well, that one fell through. Well, I got that. Well, I'm living here and I like that, but I'd rather do this later, and I'm working towards that, and it's a constant thing, right?
Yeah.
Unless, you just buy that little house that you want to live on that one street, and you're happy with that for the rest of your life, and it's not gonna, it doesn't take a constant heavy cash flow, and you're happy with it, because there's that too. There's being content with less. And less than what? Well, Are you comparing your less to somebody else's more? Or are you comparing their less to your more and thinking that you got it better than someone because you have more than them, but they're not even comparing their life to yours? You know, it's all this comparison stuff. I said that a young man, and I know this person, I said a young man, you know, he can go for years without getting wore out, you know, because first of all, he is doing what he wants to do. He's trying to achieve something, and he's going to make more mistakes than most people of a different persuasion will even think about, because he's just going, right? And that's what guys do. They just go, right? And whatever falls off, falls off. Whatever doesn't work, doesn't work. They just keep moving. And that's how most of the time people become successful, because they fall and they get up, they fall and they get, that's how babies learn to walk, right? They learn to walk from falling down, because they develop the muscles from pushing themselves back up that become the stabilizer muscles to keep them standing up. And that's how business owners become successful. They make mistake after mistake after mistake until they make decisions that really start working, and then it's smooth. That's why lots of people like franchises, right? Because everything's already laid out. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to create it. Well, you and I created something, right? We created the business that you're doing. We still create it. It's still discussed. It's not set in stone forever. There are things that are being added. There are things that are being taken away. There are things that are growing. There are things that are shrinking. You move them around. You do different things, right? It's never going to be static.
Yeah.
And we don't compare it, right? Other people compare it. Other people say, well, I saw this. And we're like, well, that's great. You know, I hope that works for those people. And they're like, well, you should do this because I saw this. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we could potentially, but it's got to fit in the budget. It's got to fit in the plan. It's got to fit in with the people we're working with. It's got to, you know, there's so many factors that people just think it's a website. Like, that's not a website. It's an interacting, living organism that is massaged gently, constantly, right?
Yeah.
So when you're comparing yourself, compare yourself to yourself. And it doesn't mean...
I don't think I was comparing myself to others. I'm comparing myself to what my goals are, and then comparing myself to what I'm feeling.
Yeah, but do you ever... Okay, so then we have to know what you think the time frame should be, that you think you're going to get the things that you want. And if you bypass that time frame, if you move beyond that time frame, then you realize that your goal was a little bit aggressive, right? Or your work was a little lacking, or a situation happened that didn't allow you to, let's say, I want to do this in 16 months, right? Well, it's now 19 months and you didn't get that done.
Well, there are different parts of this. So I'm just realizing, like, for example, a couple aspects of this one business, that another site, you know, another adjunct to this business is a couple years off. Whereas even a couple months ago, it was like, how soon can we get this done?
Right.
And so that's something that I'm shifting in my mind. And then there's also events. You know, we started out this business doing events alongside with, in addition to doing online content.
Streaming online, yeah.
And then, you know, COVID kind of put a damper on that for a good year or so. And then I'm thinking to myself, oh, okay, next year we should start planning some events. And I'm like, wait a minute, we're still building up curriculum.
Yeah.
You know, why pressure myself to have a whole nother arm of my business creating events when our goal is actually not to have in-person events, but it's to get a curriculum together. There's a time and place for events, but I'm just talking to myself, right? You know, like, is it reasonable to be thinking of events. So yes, your timeline idea is correct.
And what you're talking about needs to be brought up amongst the business team and discussed and find out what the priorities are, right?
Right.
And what your priorities are.
Because once the majority of the curriculum is done, it frees up a lot of time and space.
Yeah. Are you hindering one goal, doing another goal,
right.
and instead of focusing on one thing and getting it done in 6 months, it takes you 2 years to do both things.
Right. And then once the majority of the curriculum is done, then is a really good time to have events. Is they act like you can add to the curriculum and they're promotional. So, but another part of, so that's true as far as what you're mentioning. I need to reframe my timelines. You know, are the goals that I have in mind reasonable in the timeline? But the other thing is that there are goals that I have that involve both of us, and I kind of like we started out this whole ride was we were each thinking a different thing, but we were going in the same vehicle.
Yeah.
You thought we were going to one track. I thought we were going to another track. We each had different plans for the rest of the day.
I thought the rest of the day was free. You thought we were going to be back in 3 hours.
And it's the perfect example of, I think, what is happening in life, where I have we're both going to the track, but which one? We have a different idea in our mind. What is the end goal? What does the rest of the timeline look like?
You're like, you want to go to the track? I'm like, yeah.
Yep.
But neither one of us said which track.
Right.
There's not enough context to what we're doing.
So
and we can talk about all that.
So as far as other goals, life goals that innately involve business because we need to make money to be able to do these things, I feel like that was just a perfect case in point of what I think is happening on a grander scale, is that, like, I think I'm moving towards the goal that I want, but then I see you take a certain action or non-action, or we actually start communicating, and it's like, wait a minute, we're not going to the same place?
Right.
Even though
we are because we're in the same car, but one of us is going to be disappointed.
And so that's, again, just a very good example of...
Right. And it's not always the passenger that's disappointed, because the driver may just give in and be like, well, we could go to Monarch, but... Okay. So is there anything in particular you'd like to discuss? Specifically?
Well, I think we need to, like we discovered on this car ride, we need to, in life, actually specifically name, not just generally, specifically name where we're aiming.
Well, now the people that know us would be like, well, oh my God, you mean you guys you're like everyone else? You don't know where you're going and what you're doing? You're always so determined. You're always working so hard. You're always having so much fun together. You don't know what you want to do in life? And I mean, is that what you're saying? You're saying that you have different goals than me and I have different goals than you, and we don't know what each other's goals are?
I think it's exactly what happened in this car ride. We say, yeah, let's go bike riding, and we have different ideas. And
so if we're talking about a house, right? Right now, currently, we don't own our own house, which is fine. With me, I mean, I'm fine. I'd live that way for the rest of my life. I'm fine. Not exactly where we're living, but I don't feel a need to own a house. And I'm probably like most guys. Most guys don't feel, maybe lots of guys do, and I don't know, because when I get together with guys, we don't talk about houses.
Well, I was at the coffee shop the other day, and two guys walked in, and the first thing they started talking about, the one talked about finishing his basement. So I think it depends on what it is. It might be some people, men and women, are into only that sense of pride of this is my home and this is what I'm doing and what I'm creating, it also is an investment, you know, a long-term investment, and it's your home in as many senses of what a home is.
Yeah, and we've talked about it for a long time that I'm so pragmatic about it, you don't own your home. I mean, unless it's paid off, you don't own it. And I'm very pragmatic about that, you know. I've often said that if I want to own a home, I'll buy one for cash.
I'm just at the point, 20 years of not owning a home.
I owned a home when we met, and we owned a home in Wisconsin right before the housing bubble, right?
So, like 2 years out of our 20 years. And
Yeah.
I want to get my hands...
You want it to be more than 2 years, is what you're saying.
I want to have something that I can put my time and effort and creativity into that, first of all, I'm not wondering, well, are we just going to be moving in a year anyways? And so is it worth putting this time and money into? And then, and the rest of it is just an extrapolation of that, you know, like, you know, if you're just renting anyways, it's, you know, why put time and money into it? And if you don't know if you're going to be there long term, and it's just a sense of wanting to root, you know, or nest.
Root. Lay down roots.